Western civilization. How much do you know? My name is Russell Miles, and this is an additional episode in our Western Civilization series. We previously looked at the characteristics that distinguish the West, its origins, the infusion between East and West, how the West has evolved to become our more global culture. Now, while I'm recording this, many of us are confining ourselves at home, limiting social contact in response to the COVID-19 pandemic that is spreading around the world. So I thought we might look at the impact of disease on Western civilization. We touched on some of this in the previous series, particularly episode 8, where we looked at trade in the Silk Road. Over the next few episodes, we're going to look at the major pandemics that have impacted upon the West, the spread of disease in the age of exploration and conquest, and the advent of cooperation and international agencies in the modern era. Disease, a disorder of a function within a human, animal or plant that produces a specific symptom or harm and is not the result of physical injury. In 1964, a team from the United States Middle America research team undertook an investigation into a disease affecting Orabaya in northern Bolivia. The disease caused those affected uncontrollable bleeding, killing half of them. The team suspected that the disease was spread by the urine from wild mouse. To confirm this hypothesis, the team A. set mice traps on one side of the village to see if there was a difference in the resulting infection rate. B. set mouse traps throughout the entire village to see if there was a difference in the infection rate. Or C. assumed it was human virus and gave the villagers vaccination. Or D. did nothing and waited to see if there was a change in infection rate with the seasons. Consider your answer and we'll get back to this later in the episode. What is a virus? A microorganism that will cause illness ranging from the common cold to more severe diseases such as severe acute respiratory syndrome. B. A microorganism that cannot grow or reproduce apart from a living cell or host. C. A microorganism that will cause disease in humans, animals and plants. Or D. An ancient retrovirus in the genome whose purpose is long redundant. Viruses are microorganisms that are so small that they cannot be observed except with the aid of a powerful electronic microscope, and can't grow or reproduce apart from a living cell. A bacteria, in contrast, is a single-celled organism, much larger, and that thrives in a diverse range of environments, soils, oceans, and inside the human gut. There are about 200 kinds of viruses known to infect humans, and a few 100,000 which infect other mammals. However, there are an estimated 10 to the power of 31 viruses on the planet that infect plants, bacteria, and other organisms. Viruses play a vital role in the biosphere. There are plant viruses that confer drought or cold tolerance to plants. In mice, herpes viruses confer resistance against bubonic plague. The herpes G virus may offer some protection against AIDS. Oncolytic viruses have been engineered to kill cancer cells in people while not harming healthy cells. However, the great majority of viruses identified in plants, animals, and people appear to do nothing at all. Perhaps they are remnants of ancient viruses in the genome whose purpose is long redundant. The answer is B, a microorganism which requires a living cell or host. As mentioned at the beginning, a team from the United States Middle America Research Unit was working in Bolivia in 1963. This program was part of the US National Institute of Health. The institute had its lineage from the Merchant Marine Hospital Service in 1798, which checked arriving sailors and quarantined them if ill. The hospital service became part of the US Public Health Service. The institute worked with local and state authorities in the US, the armed forces, and overseas aid programs. This was in the context of the Cold War, with extensive international aid programs such as the Marshall Plan running hand in hand with military efforts. It also can reflect the can-do atmosphere among scientists who felt they could make much progress. The understanding of genetics was only new and was soon to show life and preventing disease was much more complex. The investigation into the disease in remote northern Bolivia was conducted by a handful of well-educated researchers whom were not necessarily expert in disease control. They were aided by experienced Bolivian scientists and local people. The US doctors were to become infected, and 3 of them probably would have died if not for the medical care provided by the US military. Regardless, their step-by-step scientific approach became a case study for such research. At one stage, to test the hypothesis that the disease was spread by wild mouse, the researchers had cheap mouse traps set in houses and feed stores on one side of the village. No new virus cases emerged on that side of the village over the next 2 weeks. They then set about laying traps throughout the village and stopped the epidemic. The details of this story are in the opening chapter on Laurie Garnett's The Coming Plague, Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance, 1994. The term plague occurs about 120 times in the Bible and refers to divine punishment. For example, Exodus 9:15. For by this time I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with a plague to wipe you off the earth. In common parlance, plague is something that causes widespread calamity, affliction, pest, or a curse. Medical definition of plague. An infectious disease due to a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. This mainly infects rats and other rodents. Fleas function as the vector carrying the bacteria from one species to another, including humans. The flea bites the rodent infected with Y. pestis and then bites people, transmitting the disease. Transmission of the plague to people can also occur from eating infected animals such as squirrels. Once someone has the plague, they can transmit it to another person by aerosol droplets. Plague bacteria secretes toxins which cause low blood pressure and swollen and painful lymph nodes, usually in the groin, armpits or neck. Other symptoms include fever, chills, headaches and extreme exhaustion. A person usually becomes ill with bubonic plague 1 to 6 days after being infected. If not treated early, the bacteria can spread to other parts of the body and cause septicemic or pneumonic plague. Septicemic plague is when plague bacteria drains into the bloodstream, causing tiny clots throughout the body, and necrosis or tissue death due to lack of circulation. There may also be direct infection of the lungs, with multi-organ failure and death, usually within a day of symptoms appearing. Only a third to a half survive an infection without medical treatment. The Ante plague in the 2nd century greatly affected the Roman Empire and is thought to have accelerated the spread of Christianity. This ancient pandemic was brought by Roman troops returning from campaigns in the Near East, around modern-day Iraq. The disease is estimated to have killed a quarter of those infected, causing the decline of 1/10 of the population and devastating the Roman army. The disease is believed to have been either smallpox or measles, perhaps both, which ravaged the population in successive waves. As the disease spread to the Rhine region, it weakened Roman garrisons, with Germanic peoples taking the opportunity to move southward. Around the same time, another epidemic afflicted the Eastern Han Empire of China, which may have been connected to the Ante plague, although there was limited trade across the Euro-Asian landmass at this time, so this is unlikely. The hypothesis that the spread of Christianity was accelerated by the Ante plague is on the assumption that Christians, compared to traditional Greco-Roman faiths, were more communal and caring for both strangers and each other, so disease less spread and those affected more often recovered. This inspired people to become Christians too. In contrast, Greco-Roman tradition saw disease as a punishment from the gods, and adherents tended to avoid the ill. The number of Christian believers within the Roman Empire increased from about 40,000 in 150 CE to 2.5 million in 300 CE. However, these views seem to be more religious propaganda created in later ages. There is scant evidence as to how plague affected religiosity in these times. The earliest Christian church was founded in Armenia to the east and outside the Roman Empire, in folklore by the apostles Bartholomew and Thaddeus in 30 CE. The wider spread of Christianity with the Roman Empire was not until the 3rd and 4th century. During the plagues, burial practices seemed little changed with no indication of Christian in iconography. And while public works in cities were curtailed, Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius seemed to have had traditional temples and shrines renovated and more built. Our next podcast will look at the Black Death, where bubonic plague emerged in China in the early 1340s, sweeping through India, Persia, Syria, Egypt and onto Europe. In the meanwhile, consider if flatulence refers to A. A disease that was believed to travel by air from town to town, B. Young men beating each other with metal-studded leather straps, C. Young men in a group farting to expel any disease, or D. Beating Jews, lepers, grave diggers and other social outcasts for causing disease. If you like this channel, please subscribe and tick like. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I can be contacted at email russmills@iprimus.com.au. Thanks for listening.